Good morning. My name is Ellen Kokenda. I'm going to go ahead and open up the staff hearing officer meeting for October 18th, 2023. First, we have preliminary matters. Any requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or addition of X agenda items? I do not have any to announce today. Number 2, preliminary matters, announcements and appeals. I don't have any appeals, but I do have an announcement for item C on today's agenda for 1231 Calle Cerrito. So if anyone is here today for that project, it has been postponed to the November 1st staff hearing officer agenda. So please note that for the record. Also, this is just a side note for all of us. We are there sometime in October, we will be having a fire drill. So if I'm hoping it doesn't happen during this meeting, but on the off chance that it does, we'll all have to evacuate. So just beware, and I hope we don't have to deal with that during a hearing. So, and then now I'm going to go ahead and, I don't have any other announcements beyond that, but I'd like to open it up for public comment for items not on today's agenda. So if anybody in the audience wishes to speak on items not on today's agenda, please fill out a speaker slip or let me know. Ms. Gu, do we have anyone attending via Zoom who wishes to speak?
Checking on our Zoom, I do not see any raised hands. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see anybody in the audience wishing to speak, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to our first item. And apologies, our screen over here isn't working, so we have City TV helping us out to try to fix that. But this is 225 Equestrian Avenue. It's a 5,350 square foot site. It's currently developed with a warehouse and attached apartment. The project consists of demolition of existing on-site structures and construction of a new 3-story, 6,233 square foot mixed-use building comprised of a 3,669 square foot single-unit residence, a 631 square foot accessory dwelling unit, a 1,287 square foot commercial office, and 580 square foot garage. The discretionary applications required for this application under the purview of the staff hearing officer or an interior setback modification to allow a 6-inch setback on the western property line, to allow portions of the 3rd story to have a 6-foot setback along the eastern lot line, and then an open yard modification to allow the at-grade open yard to be in an area used for non-residential purposes. And then we have Ms. Plummer here, who will be presenting the project on behalf of staff. So Ms. Plummer, whenever you're ready, please go ahead.
Hi, good morning. My name is Pilar Plummer, Associate Planner with the City of Santa Barbara Planning and Zoning Division. I'll be giving the staff presentation on this project. So to start off with, I want to do an aerial view of the site, and we'll go through some photos as well. Let me just zoom in slightly, assuming I can. All right, so you'll see the project site outlined in yellow. It's 225 Equestrian Avenue. And Equestrian Avenue is a narrow public street, 1 block in length, located between Santa Barbara and Garden Streets and Victoria and Anapamu Streets. Development on Equestrian Avenue does vary in terms of uses. So there's a mixture of commercial, residential, and apartments. The project site at 225 Equestrian is developed with a warehouse and attached apartment. The existing structure occupies most of the lot and is considered non-conforming to various setbacks and does not have on-street parking or does not have on-site parking. The project site is also zoned OR, which is office restricted. This is considered a transitional zone between major commercial zones and residential zones and provides sites for business, professional, and public offices, as well as a mix of complementary uses. It's also worth noting that the other side of Garden Street, so where my mouse is zoned RM, which is residential multi-unit, and a portion of Equestrian Avenue, really after 217, transitions to commercial general zoning. So adjacent to the project site is a apartment complex. Across the street is Villa Santa Barbara, which is a multi-unit assisted living development. Also adjacent to the property is a 3-story single-unit residence, and behind the project site is a 1-story single-unit residence. The project involves complete demolition of all on-site structures, so again, the warehouse and attached apartment. And as you described in the project description, construction of a new 3-story mixed-use building comprised of a residence, accessory dwelling unit, commercial office, and garage. So I'll go to the floor plan just so we can see that. So on the right, you'll see the lower floor. There's a garage proposed, and the back area is primarily the commercial office. On the second floor, there's the residence. This portion back here is the accessory dwelling unit, and the third floor is all just the single-family residence. As part of the project, the applicant is requesting 3 zoning modifications. So an interior setback modification to allow for a 6-inch setback shared with 223 Equestrian Avenue. A interior setback modification to allow portions of the third story to have a 6-foot setback rather than the required 10-foot setback as required for this type of development. And a open yard modification to allow the at-grade open yard to be an area used for non-residential purposes. Let's see. Just to show you those modifications. So starting with open yard on the first floor, their open yard requirement is to provide 15% of the net lot area at grade, and I do want to clarify that they are providing the required at grade open yard. The reason for the modification is that the open yard is in an area used primarily for non-residential purposes. You can see it's wrapped around by the commercial element of the project, and even though it's accessible to the primary residence, our ordinance requires that you not include areas used for non-residential purposes. Going to the 6-inch setback modification, hopefully you can zoom in here. So you can see, again, this is the lot line shared with 223 Equestrian Avenue. You'll see a 6-foot setback and a 10-foot setback. So what that means in terms of this development and the zoning for this property is that the first and second story of the building is required to meet a 6-foot interior setback, and the third story is required to meet a 10-foot setback. They're asking to build, again, the building within that setback with a 6-inch setback. And then regarding the third story, they're asking for a portion of the third story to have a 6-foot setback rather than the 10-foot setback. You'll see that most of the building is pushed back to meet the 10, but it does include some areas on the third story here, 2 decks and a stair landing. So the request for the modifications, primarily the 6-inch setback, if I can go to the photos, is related to the existing development that shares this property. 223 Equestrian Avenue is a single-story residence. It's 3 stories, and it was built essentially right up to the property line. The resolution for Planning Commission was for a 0 setback. And this was primarily due to site constraints on that property. They have a narrow width. And actually, if we'll go back to the context study, you can see a majority or a fair amount of lots on Equestrian Avenue are actually quite narrow, which does pose development constraints when you have to meet residential zoning standards, particularly again in a very transitional zoning district. That does pose challenges. The adjacent lot 223 Equestrian is around 29.5 in width. And the adjacent to that one as well is also quite narrow. It's a little bit larger than 223, but is still quite narrow in width. The subject site is 50 feet. That modification to allow the adjacent development to have a 3-story residence to the property line resulted in a blank white wall. So part of the request for this is to match the adjacent building's massing and to address, again, the blank white wall that is shared. Again, the justification for that modification by Planning Commission in 1998 was due to site constraints, but also because 225 Equestrian Avenue with the warehouse and apartment was also built non-conforming to the property line. So it seemed reasonable at the time. Staff is supportive of this request. The design was reviewed by the Historic Landmarks Commission on 2 occasions, and I should actually show you the elevations just so you can see the overall design of the building. First in February of 2022 or 2023, and then later this year again. So you can see just for context what the design looks like. I will say a portion of the third story, the design did change over time slightly. They were always requesting the 6-inch setback, but they did make changes, and I'll let the applicant for the project discuss those in more depth. But I do want to say that the footprint or the actual building envelope at the third story is pushed back from the front. And you can see that on the floor plans here. So this is the third floor plan. So you'll see that there's roof area that's above the second story, and then it's pushed back from the front lot line for the residents. Really, there's this upper story deck up there, so it is pushed back from the street. Yeah. So staff is supportive of this modification in this case due to some of the development pattern within the neighborhood, which again contains generally narrow lots and includes a mix of development that's conforming, non-conforming, or received modifications just based on general site history of the neighborhood. There are sites that received modifications due to site constraints in the neighborhood and also due to development pattern, but also because if they were to do a conforming option, it may result in a canyoning effect between 223 and 225, given the height and massing of the two buildings. Again, this setback was positively received by the Historic Landmarks Commission. I will say that they did make comments while they were supportive of the size, bulk, and scale. I think there was a lot of discussion between the commissioners in terms of, overall size and ways to address that. There's a lot of components to this building, again, since it contains a residence ADU, office, and garage. But overall, they're improving the site in the sense that they will now be providing conforming parking on site for the residents. They are going to meet the front setback requirement, the rear setback requirement, and the interior setback along this site, except for the portions they're requesting at the third story. In terms of this modification to allow for the decks, staff is also supportive of that. This setback modification will allow for a setback shared with 1223 Garden Street, the adjacent apartment complex, by providing a 6-foot setback. And this area here with the decks, again, and stair landing allows for some additional access to the lower floor that's exterior to the unit. So that's considered a benefit. The decks are considered transitional. There's a number of decks proposed throughout the building, which are considered an amenity to the unit. But as well, if we go back to the context study here, the adjacent property is currently developed with an apartment and has, I believe it's about a 24-foot wide driveway. So there is some additional buffer there. There's also no there's some windows here, but there's no exterior decks facing this proposed development. In terms of the open yard modification being requested, because of the proposed use, which is mixed use, they are required to provide, as I previously mentioned, 15% of the open yard at grade, and they are providing that with 2 locations, and they do meet the required minimum dimensions for those open yard areas. Both of these areas are accessed or accessible by the residential unit, either through the exterior paseo that goes along this line, or from the stair from the second story. Staff is supportive of this because while this area will be used by the commercial, or is surrounded by the commercial office, it's accessed by the residential unit. And as well, they are providing more of the private open yard, which is required. So for this development, they're required to provide 96 square feet of private open yard, and that can be located on any story for the residential unit. And as you can see, they're providing a number of decks. So at the second story, they have relatively small deck here. And most of the decks are really at the third story. So you can see this here with the portions that are in that third story setback, and then this deck here as well. The site is also located within proximity to a number of parks, which you can see. Well, it's located in a generally busy, dense area with access to a number of parks, including and as well State Street, I would say. So a number of outdoor spaces that can, be easily accessed by this property within walking distance. So, yeah. That generally covers my presentation. Again, this was reviewed by the Historic Landmarks Commission on 2 occasions. I do want to say there was neighborhood input at both hearings. And particularly, there was discussion with the adjacent property for 223 Equestrian, because they're the one who is most likely going to be the most affected due to the 6-inch setback requested. I think a lot of the discussion was mostly about size, bulk, and scale of the proposed development, all the components of the proposed building, and private views. And with that, I will turn it over to the architect, Mr. Shelton, for his presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Plummer. Do you mind turning on the mic? Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Jeff Shelton, architect. Get rid of this.
I'm sorry, we got a lot of wires and things happening, so just move chairs out of your way if you need to.
The owners, unfortunately, are down with COVID, so they are just watching today. They wanted to be here. I'm not sure how much architecture you want to get into, but you can ask those questions. When our clients bought this lot, the first thing I did was talk to planning, send them diagrams, show them the extreme problem we have with that big wall on our property line. And they said they supported, very interesting, and that this is something they could support to mitigate the previous modification. And so, it just seemed, I was trying to get how reasonable this was to proceed.
Mr. Sheldon, with that, and pardon
Yeah.
my interruption, could you kind of explain your thinking and how that poses, for myself and for the audience, like how does that wall pose a problem, and kind of, can you just talk us through that a little bit more as part of your presentation, please?
All right. So our lot, well, let me continue. I'll get to that. Yes. All right, thanks. So well, I guess I'll start with that now then. Right next to our, right on the property line, 1 to 2 inches away, we have a 35-foot wall, basically 90 feet long, give or take. We can go back and look at the measurements there. But 35 feet is at the taller part, which when we get rid of our building, we're going to have a big blank wall right on our property line. If it were built to the existing code, it would be 6 feet and 10 feet back, offering areas for plants, windows back there, and then we could go back to the code and send ours and move ours back, and we would have at that point 12 and 20 foot between the buildings. Right now, if we were to build a house on our property, we would have a 35-foot wall on the west side with no windows right on the property line. It would render this, you could not build a pleasant house, and the whole street would now have a big blank wall as part of its, creating a canyon, part of its ambiance. So when we first met the owners, we told them we needed to build up against their wall. And we discussed this. They said their main thing was not to block their views to the north. They were in favor of us building there if we didn't block their views. There's only so much we can do. Our western view is blocked. if we built there automatically. We cannot, we have a big 35-foot wall. So the idea was to build up against that and then go the other direction, and sort of mitigate the problems with that. Barry Burkus is the earliest owner's project. So we presented our project to HLC, and they informed us that we don't need to, views aren't protected, but my owners really wanted to help out. And so we moved our whole, can I get to this? Is this how we go forward? First of all, here's the wall. And this is already up at 20 feet. So you got to go down 20 more feet or 15 more feet right there. We have this giant wall sitting right here. And if we had a house sitting here, we'd have this 35-foot wall right in front of us on our property line. In fact, the conduit is on our property that's on their wall. So this is a situation, just two houses, two lots down, it's C zone where you can build right up against each other. So this is transition zone, and this was a mistake to allow this first modification without being able to grant our property the same modification. So if we go to this plan right here. So after our first meeting with HLC, we went back and talked to the owner about what they wanted, and they wanted us. If you can see this cursor here, our third floor was right here, to code, 20 feet back from the street. The owners wanted us to move it another 15 feet back, plus or minus here, to in line with their built third floor, and we did that. We flipped the whole stairwell from over here to this side for the neighbors, not for us. That opened this up for them. We had a second meeting. They still didn't like it because our tower was out here. So since then, and since HLC commented, we moved the tower back another 10 feet, opening the view for them this way. So they also have views all the way 300, they can look, they sit on the deck and look all these directions here. It's this view is what they wanted. And now we moved this back another 10.5 feet since we last met with HLC, and the neighbors like this. We've got, correspondence that they like this, and it came down to a little wall here. They wanted us to sign a covenant on this little wall right here. And right now this wall is at 58 inches, and they like that. They wanted us to sign a covenant that says our vegetables and plants wouldn't be higher than 58 inches from now on. And it sort of, these clients are here, they wouldn't be complaining if we'd have signed that covenant. But we've done all this expense, moved it back to 35 feet per the request, moved this tower back per the request, and there's nothing really else we can do to make a building work here. Our top floor is only 22 feet wide right here. We've basically mirrored what they're doing that way. We're mirroring it, looking at it this way. The only other project is going to work on this lot is going to be a housing project that doesn't have these same restrictions. There's just no one in their right mind would build a house with a 35-foot wall on their property line, blank wall, on this lot. There's no reason to build a building here, unless it somehow was up against 223 equestrian. We tried. We'd sell the lot. There's nothing else to do here besides some sort of lot-to-lot housing project. We received a number of letters recently from many neighbors. We really tried to make this building work with this street. It will be the only sort of HLC, El Pueblo Viejo type building on this lot besides the restaurant, judge for yourself. There are disturbing letters, but they mostly talk about size, bulk, and scale. This has been gone over with the HLC, and they have approved the concept, size, bulk, and scale. They want me to calm the building down a little bit in colors and little detail architectural issues. But if you go back and look at HLC, we've responded to every one of their comments, and we even more so on this moving the tower back now. That this is what needs to be done on this street. There's nothing else besides a lot-to-lot project, lot line to lot line project that will work. We've honored their deck views as much as I've done on any project. So there isn't other directions here, other opportunities here, and these letters are mostly complaining about size, bulk, and scale, not the modifications we're requesting. So we just ask that these reasonable, necessary modifications get approved so we can mitigate the past modifications.
And Mr. Shelton, do you mind just touching on your open yard modification request and the eastern? So
Yes.
You've talked a lot about the western interior setback modification.
Okay.
But just kind of, again, just walk me through
So
kind of
during
your project design and how you got there.
Well, when we did the first idea, when we had the stairwell over here and the neighbors were upset about that, HLC, I told them the problem. They loved the layout with the open yard. We have a big courtyard here to get as much open yard as possible. And I said, well, we'll go back and work with the neighbors. And we weren't asking for this side setback. They said, go ahead and we would support that too, Jeff. They suggested it, if this helps you keep your courtyard and help the neighbors. And that's how we got to that. Now, the fact is, if you said you're not going to give us this one, we could redesign and make this one work over here, if that was the problem. But no one's complaining about that one. We could take some, this is a parapet wall. It's the same as if there was no third floor. If that wasn't called a deck, if it was a roof, it wouldn't be a violation. So it looks the same no matter what we're doing. So we could modify this one, no problem. So that's where that came from. It was suggested. We had not thought about that. It was suggested by HLC, so we barely nibbled on that one to make things work, to get this nice fire exit right here. I mean, safety, an extra exit. As far as this, we did get our 15% on the ground, and planning said, yeah, you did, Jeff, but it's not very accessible. It just doesn't feel right. And I argued, but didn't win. And but we still have the 15% down here, but we have an extraordinary amount of outside space, which is important in Santa Barbara. And that really limits the size of this whole third floor, for one. Because we moved this whole thing back for the neighbors here, we did reduce the second floor deck, but it was a sacrifice that my clients didn't want to make. But it was all for the neighbors to give them this view, this 35 feet. So, my clients did not want me to do that because it got rid of their second floor deck, some of it. So we reduced some upper deck. I added some more over here to try to get some of that back. And I think this has been a great compromise. Neighbors don't. That we matched what they wanted. We moved the towers back. We got as much north view as we can. They like the size of the wall we have here. They said they like it and they would not complain if we would limit our size of our kitchen garden. So quite frankly, my clients were frustrated about all this and didn't want to sign a covenant. So it's been very frustrating for my clients moving here. But I think we've come up, HLC likes it. They recommended it. The architects can clearly see why we have the setback. There's no other way. Another architect's not going to come up with another idea here for a building that fits in with this street. So without this modification, this project's done. So I'm just letting you know, there's no other solution here.
Thank you. And does that conclude your presentation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shelton. Now we're going to open up to public comment. So I just will invite anyone in the audience, and I do have speaker slips, and I'll call on you. But if you haven't filled out a speaker slip and would like to speak, please do so. We have speaker slips over here and a pen. And I just want to also kind of notify everyone on Zoom, if they're attending, that this is for 225 Equestrian Ave for comments, for public comment. In the meantime, I just want to acknowledge that I did receive written correspondence in advance of this hearing from Barbara Houter, Mark Kenneth Flores, Randy Meehan, Anne Marie Powers, Kim Hunter, Richard Westerman, and Daniel A. Murphy. So again, they were distributed. I have read through all of those comments, and that will be part of the public record. So I'm going to call up, first we have Rick Westerman, and then on deck will be Jane Westerman. And you'll have 2 minutes to speak. And if I could ask Ms. Gu to switch over to screen so we have our timer. Okay, whenever you're ready, Mr. Westerman.
Now, I thought it said 3 minutes on the agenda, so I,
So just for clarification, 3 minutes is for city council meetings, for staff hearing officer, Historic Landmarks Commission, all the design review boards, 2 minutes. I think planning commission is also 3 minutes. I can't remember, forgive me. But yes, we have a lot. I just have to get through a number of speakers today, so whenever you're ready, please.
now the other thing is that my wife and I did this together. I think it'd be more efficient if I could just read the whole thing rather than her changing horses in the middle of a stream. That's what we did at the HLC.
I'm happy to accommodate that.
Okay. Well, Barry Burkus was granted mods in order to keep his house from being 17.5 feet wide. And at 50 feet of frontage, 225 really doesn't have the same restraints in terms of development. A zero setback for us on that property line means impossible access for repairs and maintenance, no access to lines, noise from the adjacent property, security concerns, overgrown landscaping, and just a huge visual mass. Now, the city of Santa Barbara requested that to define if the property was consistent with existing patterns of development in the neighborhood, specifically if there was a pattern of reduced setbacks, open yard, et cetera. And I think we can show how this proposed project does not fit those requests. Exhibit 1 shows the assessor's map and shows 225 to be a large lot, 50 feet by 107 feet, and it's rectangular. Certainly it's possible to develop a substantial sized building on that size lot without a 6-inch setback. The context study also provided by Mr. Shelton shows only 2 instances of immediately adjacent buildings. Exhibit 2, if that can go up. That's between 223 and 225, which was built in 1875 on the property line. The only other zero setback is between 228 and 230 Victoria. And if there was the setbacks were honored there to the 22-foot lot, the building would be 11 feet wide. The second instance is between 223 and 225, And that mod was granted to keep 223's lot, or to keep the structure from being only 17 feet wide. That's Exhibit 3. I guess it can't go up.
So-
But there is no pattern of reduced setbacks, only 2 instances where the modifications were allowed to have reasonable development of 2 very narrow lots. There are numerous instances of misinformation on the neighborhood comparison and context study. Several single-family homes are listed as apartments. Some are listed as commercial properties when they're really student housing, and 3 properties on Equestrian listed in the context study don't even exist. As calculated from the neighborhood comparison table on the plans, Exhibit 5, the average square footage of equestrian addresses is 2,551 square feet. That's 2.4 times the proposed structure is 6,233 square feet, which is 2.4 times the average square footage, 1.7 times the size of 223, and 2.7 times that of the house at 217 Equestrian, which is the largest single-family lot on Equestrian, showing that indeed a structure can be developed on a lot of that size. There will be a huge mass effect of 223 and 225 if both of them are built together, brought together with no setback. Equestrian Avenue is a street of muted houses and businesses and buildings, some dating back to the late 1800s. Some of us appreciate Mr. Shelton's architecture, but many in the neighborhood feel it would be better situated on Garden Street and Chapala Street, but not on the tiny one-way street of Equestrian. Granting the requested modifications will only succeed in allowing the construction of a massive building that fits neither the street nor the neighborhood. We appreciate your consideration of our concerns and respectfully request that you deny the requested modifications to allow for the design of a building that's more in keeping with our neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Westerman. And Jane Westerman, did you wish to say anything else? Okay, I just want to give you the opportunity if you wish. Next, I have Dan Murphy, and then after Dan Murphy, I'm going to call on Randy Meehan. Good morning.
Thank you for the opportunity to address this issue. Robert Frost's 1914 poem, Mending Wall, said, good fences make good neighbors. I think this is a mending wall time or moment. This project is completely out of context for this very small neighborhood. Although I appreciate the design that Mr. Shelton has put forward, a 3-story building, we're really trading in one nuisance when it was Victor the florist's warehouse for another nuisance. I don't agree with the comment from Mr. Shelton that this building is somehow is going to fit in with the street. I think it's very clear it's not going to fit in with the street, and that's why they're asking for these variances. It's gargantuan in its size and structure, and I think that is something I'm very surprised the Landmarks Committee didn't take that into consideration. Although it's a pretty building, it's just too big, and it's a, bless you, it's a one-way street. This is going to ruin it for everyone. It's going to ruin it for my law offices. It's going to ruin it for my neighbor, Randy Meehan. It's going to ruin it for my neighbor, Ann Powers. These are all residences. This will be a 3-year construction project. So I don't believe the variances should be granted. I don't think there should be a modification of the setbacks. And I think it should be scaled down. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Murphy. And then Randy Meehan. And then after Randy Meehan, the last person I have is Anne Marie Powers. So if anyone else in the audience wishes to speak, please go ahead and fill out a speaker slip. Good morning.
Thank you. I was a little surprised, I guess. I live directly behind 225 Equestrian. And I was actually quite excited that that ugly barn was going to be gone that I've looked at for 32 years. But I didn't realize how high the building was actually going to be. There were the flags up there, but they were on the front, which I really, from most of my property, could not really actually see how they affected my backyard. So my main objection is really that. And also because there's an issue about part of that property that was never mine, I guess, was in my yard, never part of the barn thing. And so not only was it higher, it's coming back into closer to my property line than the barn has been. So those were my, I love the architecture, but yeah, I just feel it's a little high for my for my building.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And as I mentioned last speaker, Anne Marie Powers.
Good morning, and thank you. I too have lived there 32 years. We are neighbors, Randy and I. And I have to agree, I'm glad for the ugly pink building to go. But to have this mammoth building, and it is beautiful, there's no argument there. It's just way too high. And my concerns are airflow, light for the rest of us, and emergency vehicles. Being able to get in and get those fires out. Our homes are over 100 years old. We don't have the protection of a new building. So I'm not in favor, but thank you.
I'm sorry, do you mind clarifying? Do you live on Victoria in the
On
the
Victoria,
rear?
right. We
That's-
both live on Victoria
Okay,
Street.
yeah, I just wanted to verify that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. So I don't see anyone else in the audience wishing to speak. Ms. Gu, do we have anyone else attending via Zoom who's raised their hands?
I'm checking on Zoom. I do not see any raised hands for this particular item. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. Ms. Gu, if you could go back to the plans, please. Okay. And then let's see. Mr. Shelton, if you want to come back up to the mic. So I just, I want to clarify one thing just for process, that I'm the staff hearing officer. The decisions before me today are land use decisions. It's for these 3 modifications, the 2 interior setback modifications, one for the east lot line and the other for the western interior lot line, and then an open yard modification. My purview is very different from the Historic Landmarks Commission purview, which is looking at the design and the aesthetics, and probably most importantly from a lot of what I heard today, the mass, the bulk, and the scale. So that's the height of the building, the massing, the kind of how it fits in, patterns of development along the street. I'm looking at them, and part of our communication when there are projects that require design review, Historic Landmarks Commission review, they send a communication to me as far as the aesthetic appropriateness of the modification requests, and then it gives me information. But ultimately, as projects move along, they first have to get their land use approvals, and then they have to go to get their design review approval at the, in this case, Historic Landmarks Commission will have to decide on, again, the mass, the bulk, and the scale. So I just want to put that in context that as I'm looking at this, I'm kind of a horse with blinders on to some extent, but I'm taking communications from the Historic Landmarks Commission, taking it into consideration. I did go out on site to look at the context, to understand the context of Equestrian Avenue, Victoria Street, the neighborhood. This is very much a transitional neighborhood from when we look at our zoning map and from commercial general zone to this kind of moving into a residential mixed-use zone. So again, I just want to put that out there before getting into more questions. And hopefully that can help, and I can talk a little bit more about that if moving forward. I guess one thing, Mr. Shelton, I have to say, I had a lot of questions, but you've answered many of them, in particular, kind of the evolution of the design. I was very curious in kind of how it changed from, starting off with the Historic Landmarks Commission at meeting 1 to their meeting 2, and then kind of how you got to some of those things and addressing some of the comments about the wall. So I don't, again, some of those have been very much covered already. I'm curious for the eastern setback. Could you take me to some of the elevations for that? With the decks.
Okay. The new elevations?
Yes.
Okay. How do I reduce this? Oh, it's down
Yeah,
here.
sorry, it's very awkward. If you want to zoom out, yes, you can do that. And then you can use the arrows to get you down pages.
Yeah, I'm generally not great at this, but the, just while we're here, there's this south elevation, and we are the same size building.
That's facing the street.
Yeah, that we are the same size building as 223, and on the property line, near the property line as 223. So I'm not sure of those things. We're just the same. So, here's where the 6-inch one is, and here is the 6 and 10 foot setback. There's 10 feet right there. Okay. So now we'll go down that, and then you can see it over here too. It's 6 feet from here to here, as required. And then this portion is where, I still think this is 13 feet to here, the third floor. But we're calling this deck the third floor. So visually, architecturally, if we called that a roof and not a deck, it wouldn't need a modification. So, so that's visually, that doesn't change anything. That we could fix that one, but that's more of a technical modification here. So if we're looking back from the parking lot of that 1960s apartment on Garden Street, this is what we see here. Okay, so so this is where, and planning can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a couple feet of this parapet is in violation. This parapet right here is in violation, and that's where we're asking for that eastern modification. All this is all within the rules, and this is what HLC has looked at. Now, by the way, see that tower right here? Here's where it was last time HLC saw it, and we moved it back here for the neighbors at 223. So we continue each time we draw this to just keep shoving it around in their favor. We've not done nothing that my clients wanted. Now, this is the same height for some of these neighbors next door as the 223 house. So just to be clear, it's not like it hasn't been done. It's been done right next door, and we do. So that was that. And then, by the way, here's the outline of the neighbor's house here at 223. That's on our property line, 1 to 2 inches from our property line. So that shows you, it's looking in reverse, but that shows you our big dilemma on our lot. And it is all concrete wall, so there's no fire issue, there's no sound issue. So I heard little comments about that. It'll be much more fire safe than it is now.
So again, I've spent quite a bit of time looking at the site and walking around the neighborhood. Thank you all for coming out today, and Mr. Shelton for your presentation. I'll just kind of start with my comments. I'll go with the easiest first, I'm going to say, and then, which is the open yard modification. This is kind of, you're trying to, well, first of all, the existing building that's there now is, this site is kind of ripe for development, I'll say, in terms of changing it up. And what's there now doesn't necessarily, it's a known entity, but it's not necessarily offering the street anything beautiful. And that's, no slam on the current owners. But it's just something that, I'm not surprised that there's a project being proposed here. As far as the open yard modification goes, I can agree with staff that, you've provided for the zoning requirements for this project that you need to provide. There's different pieces of it, and you've been able to accommodate kind of private open yard with more than what is generally allotted. It's just a nuance for the 15% and like primarily serving what's more kind of shown as on the floor plans as the non-residential area. So it doesn't 100%, that's where that staff kind of took a position. Again, it would be a little bit awkward for the residents of this mixed-use building to necessarily spend time down there. But with that said, you've accommodated those spaces by providing significant portions of private open yard on their decks, and I feel like that's sufficient. It also, I've seen a lot of infill development in and around the downtown, and anytime someone's trying to propose a new unit, sometimes the open yard is the hardest thing to get because of there's existing development there, or if something's new, it can be a little bit awkward. So I think with all of the resources of what is the purpose of open yard, there are lots of parks and opportunities to get outside. So in addition to providing significant amount of private outdoor area, I am supportive of this modification because it does secure an appropriate improvement on the lot. I think similarly, I'm going to talk about the eastern setback modification, which is, can you go to the site plan, please? And maybe this is just a
The
clarification.
site plan, one of these, maybe?
Yeah, yes, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, that's fine. Or maybe one that shows the decks a little bit more. I'm trying to think if there was
This one. This one right here.
the one, A 1.4 maybe? Or the floor plan, I'm sorry, A 2.0.
2.0.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
And it seems like, and I just want clarification from Ms. Plummer. So in the first Historic Landmarks Commission meeting, comment number 4 said the commission is in support of the modification in an effort to alleviate neighbors' concerns. What? do you
Okay,
know what that was
so to
referring-
clarify, thanks for the question, Ms. Kokinda. So at the initial Historic Landmarks Commission, staff did note that 3 modifications were going to be required. They are the 3 modifications that are being requested today. But at the time, just in correspondence with Mr. Shelton, there was the potential that the 2 modifications, the open yard and that interior setback modification with the deck areas, it wasn't exactly this configuration, but portions of the building were in the 6-foot, or in the 10-foot setback at the 3rd story. So we did note all 3 modifications at that hearing. And it's noted in the minutes that the Historic Landmarks Commission said that they would be supportive if the applicant were to pursue that interior setback modification. I think primarily it was to see what sort of changes could be done to address concerns from the neighbors at large. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That was my understanding. I just wanted confirmation on that. So for this eastern interior setback, I'm supportive. Again, it's, there's, going out on site, there's a significant buffer with the adjacent driveway. It's still a relatively, it's a stairwell, it's some decking. I don't foresee any major nuisance issues. That's not what I've heard the majority of the, too much comments. So I can support staff's input and regarding that that this modification secures an appropriate improvement on the lot. Again, I don't see any noise or privacy concerns given the driveway separation. Lastly, the one that is the western interior setback modification, I think that overall, this project is doing a lot to kind of address some of the awkwardness of the current development that's on site. It's pushing back, so no longer needing a front setback modification. And if this project were to move over in order to comply with our interior setback requirements, I have major concerns about the canyonization effect and what the context of walking down the street would be and seeing just two kind of massive walls, even if, the 225 could be broken up in some way. It's just, it's not necessarily, it doesn't have a, I see the issue and not necessarily wanting to create a tunnel effect with this particular pattern of neighborhood. I also think that pushing back the development, so kind of I always try to understand the evolution of the design of where the applicant has come from to know how, what have they done to accommodate, alleviate, reduce the scale of, and so I see that a lot of it has been pushed back between the first iteration to address some of those comments, so I appreciate that. And thinking that, again, it's just not, that having the canyonization effect can be, it doesn't bode well for such large buildings. And we have many instances of practically every building downtown is built lot line to lot line. So there's quite a bit of context for how it can be done safely, mitigated to address fire concerns. And all of this is reviewed. It's routed to our different departments and divisions. So I agree with staff and Mr. Shelton's assessment in trying to modify this project or address some of the concerns that the neighbors had. Private views aren't protected, but again, trying to create some sensitivity and working in that, this is a really, the constraints of this lot is larger than the adjacent lot, but the adjacent lot's development impact kind of what can happen on this site effectively. So again, I can go ahead and make the approval for the western interior setback modification as outlined in the staff report and say that this project is further exempt from further environmental review under 15303 of the California Environmental Quality Act section. So that's my decision today. I do want to just acknowledge that all of my decision is appealable to the Planning Commission. Ms. Gu, if you could swap screens. Within 10 calendar days, anyone can submit an appeal to the Planning Commission, or any planning commissioner could suspend my decision within that 10 calendar day timeline as well. But just again, to reiterate, I think what I heard today of the concerns is that it's primarily in the realm of the Historic Landmarks Commission. So generally, the height, the mass, bulk, and scale of the project, the aesthetics, the design of it, all of those details, that's all within the Historic Landmarks Commission. So I highly recommend that you continue to pursue this project. And if you aren't already an interested party, I suggest that you participate. We can make sure to add your information to the Historic Landmarks Commission so that you'll receive those regular updates when this project comes back. But again, this project is in a transitional zone, and I feel like overall it's going to be, this site has an opportunity for development, and yes, I thank you all so much for your time today. And now we can move to the next project. Okay, we have 36 State Street. The proposed project involves a 1,706 square foot ground floor commercial lease space with Area B of the Hotel California mixed-use development located at 36 State Street and currently operated by Foley Winery. The project proposes to add 486 square feet of outdoor seating, or 18 seats, new outdoor dining furniture, patio heaters and screens, and minor exterior alterations to the iron barriers and windows. The discretionary application required at this hearing under the purview of the staff hearing officer is a coastal development permit to allow expansion of the restaurant winery use in the non-appealable jurisdiction of the city's coastal zone. And staff has determined that this project qualifies for an exemption under 15301 existing facilities. And we have Ms. Arciniega here to present the project. Ms. Gu, do you mind switching over to the project plans? Actually, have you pulled, I haven't opened them up. Did you already
They're
open
open.
up? Okay, great.
Thank you, Ms. Kokenda. I'm Megan Arciniega, project planner. Going over 36 State Street, which is a tenant space that's part of the Californian Hotel, but it's operated by, or leased out to Foley Winery. It's pulled up here in Google Street View to kind of give you a visual of the existing arcade that is permitted as part of the development. And the project before you today is essentially an expansion of the winery seating to that front arcade patio area. It's pretty minor, so about 400 square feet in front of the Foley Winery space itself, 18 seats. The reason for the request is that this expansion of outdoor seating is an intensification of use in the coastal zone. So that requires a coastal development permit. We're in the non-appealable jurisdiction, and so it is a decision for the staff hearing officer. There's no other changes of use or intensification of use to the operations itself, just minor improvements with the addition of outdoor seating, minor changes to windows, doors, and the guard railing, patio heaters, and minor architectural details that were reviewed by the Historic Landmarks Commission. They received favorable comments on those design changes as well. The other element to discuss is parking. So generally, an expansion of commercial area requires additional parking associated with that square footage. However, the project is in the AB 2097 transit area, so no additional parking is required for expansion of use or a project that meets the definition of AB 2097 development. Although the development is part of the hotel itself, there's no interior access to the hotel. This is actually operated pretty solely separate from the hotel, as is a couple of their other spaces. So it is not a use that's in conjunction with the hotel. Therefore, it qualifies for the use of AB 2097, so no additional vehicle parking is required. However, one additional bicycle parking is required and is proposed by the applicant. For the whole of the Californian, the bicycle parking is kind of provided throughout the development, so you'll see some bicycle parking provided back here for other portions, some inside garages, and then the new space would be out here behind area, this is Area A, and then there's additional bike parking in Area C. So their new space is in Area A. Planning staff has reviewed that and finds that acceptable. The AB 2097 expressly says that the city has the purview to require bicycle parking, even though it does waive vehicle parking requirements. That concludes staff's presentation. If you have any questions.
Can you just point out the bicycle parking in relation to the new seating or the extended seating?
So it's not a part of the same corner, it's
Yeah.
a different part. Yeah, it's back here.
Okay, thank you. That's what I just want to confirm. Okay. And we have the applicants here, if you would like to introduce yourselves and share any other thoughts about this.
Hi, this is Joe from Sharing. Oh, hi, this is Joe from Sharing Associate Architects.
And Dawn Sherry from Sherry and Associates Architects.
Yeah, I think Megan actually explained everything of this project. This project is 36 State Street and ground level of Hotel California, and there are several commercial lease space, and this project lease space is the only one that doesn't have outdoor seating. Let's see. That's in the corner of Area B, and this is Blackbird, another lease space. It has outdoor seating here, and we propose 18-seat outdoor space with wrought iron barrier fence. This fence is exactly matched to, where is zoom out here. This is the proposed fence. Is a material, color, height, design, everything is to match adjacent lease space, outdoor space. And part of Megan's explanation, we required one more bicycle parking for the new 18 outdoor seating. So one vehicle parking per each 3 seats, so 6 vehicle parking, and one bicycle parking per every 7 vehicle parking. So we need one bicycle parking. And the project site is here across the street. This is the building A section. And the bicycle rack is exactly matched to existing. And we also proposed 2 pane of existing glass pane in the existing storefront, from the fixed to operable, to maximize the interaction between indoor and outdoor seating. This fixed pane to be replaced with a new operable window. And that only 3 things are the scope of this proposal.
Thank you so much. This is a very straightforward project, but it's really interesting. Thank you, Ms. Arciniega, for your staff report, because I think it was very helpful how you explained AB 2097 and tried and kind of teased out the issues and kind of looking at the space separate from the hotel. So that was super helpful as a reviewer. Again, this is just trying to accommodate, you're required to get a coastal development permit anytime there's intensification of use. This is, small intensification. It'll be a benefit to have more seating along the sidewalk. It's beautifully done. So I agree with staff's assessment and can approve the coastal development permit and say that it's consistent with the policies of the California Coastal Act. You've, added the one bicycle parking space, but again, you're exempt from any additional vehicle parking with this intensification of use, and that the project is consistent with all other applicable policies of the city's local coastal plan and all of the guidelines. You followed HLC administrative approval, the guidelines for fencing and all that. Again, that's out of my purview, but I can at least confirm that, and also can confirm that staff has determined that this project qualifies for the further environmental review under 15301. So that is my decision. My decision is an appealable item, so within 10 calendar days, anyone can submit an appeal, and any member of the Planning Commission could suspend my decision. Yes, but otherwise, good luck with your project, and thank you all so much. And I'm sorry that you had to wait so long.
I just wanted to state for the record that there's no one in the room.
Open
and
up
that-
public comment. Okay, hold up, time out, sorry, public comment is open. Thank you, gosh,
And looking on Zoom, I do not see any raised
okay,
hands.
so I'm gonna go ahead and close public comment. We do not have any items, I did not receive any public comment, and I just issued your approval, and let's pretend I did that in the correct order. Okay, thank you, everybody. And this meeting is adjourned because the last item, 1231 Calle Cerrito Alto, is postponed to November 1st. Thank you.